Live from the Republican National Convention in downtown Milwaukee, it is the Dan O'Donnell Show. And on this, quite possibly the biggest news week of the past decade, we have even more breaking news. A federal judge within the last 10 minutes has just dismissed the federal documents case, the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump. Judge Eileen Cannon issuing that ruling at about 8:53 this morning, saying that the case violated the appointments clause of Article 2 of the Constitution. Special counsel Jack Smith's use of a permanent indefinite appropriation also violates the appropriations clause. Essentially, what she is saying is that Special counsel Smith's very appointment and the fact that he had an indefinite appropriation, meaning that he was essentially given unlimited money for an indefinite or unlimited period of time, that two separate constitutional articles were violated. In fact, this appears to be a direct result of that federal case, that United States Supreme Court case from just a couple of weeks ago that had the left positively apoplectic, saying that Trump could now become a dictator. Well, essentially, what this judge ruled was that the special counsel was imbued with almost dictatorial prosecutorial powers. The court, she says, need not address the proper remedy for the funding of the special counsel's office, given the dismissal on appointments clause grounds. The effect of this order is confined to this proceeding. Superseding indictment, she writes, is dismissed because Special Counsel Smith's appointment violates the appointment clause of the United States Constitution. It is, in fact, a 93-page ruling, and we will get to all of it on this, a jam-packed show. Obviously, we can't go any further without saying our thoughts and prayers are with the man, the huge Trump supporter who was killed at the rally on Saturday afternoon, shielding and protecting his family. We will get to all of that. We also will be joined live from the floor of the Media Row by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, coming up at 10:06 this morning. Coming up at 9:35, Wisconsin Congressman Brian Stile. The RNC is here in Milwaukee, and you still have a chance to win $1,000 in our sizzling summer cash contest. The word this hour is indeed cash. C-A-S-H, cash. You have got until 55 past this hour to go to our website. That's newstalk1130.com if you're listening to us in Milwaukee, WIBA.com if you're listening to us in Madison. If you want to watch the show live from the convention, we are streaming via the DanoCam at Dan O'Donnell Show on X, Facebook.com/Dan O'Donnell Show, and on our YouTube channel, just search for Dan O'Donnell or Dan O'Donnell Show. There. We are always taking your calls. We are always reading your texts. 414-799-1130. That is our AdventNows.com talk and text line. You can reach us toll free, 1-800-838-9476. Email me directly, dod@iheartmedia.com. 2 millimeters. That was the difference between life and death. That was the difference between a triumphant fist bump and one of the darkest days in American history. 2 millimeters. We're constantly bombarded with messages that democracy is hanging by a thread. Well, it turns out the width of that thread is 2 millimeters. Because someone, rather obviously poisoned by the rhetoric that democracy is constantly under assault, missed. He was allowed to climb up on top of a building in full view, it seems, of what appears to be a thoroughly incompetent Secret Service and get off multiple shots before he was immediately taken out by a sniper's bullet. But had his bullet been just 2 millimeters more to the left, we would be talking about a completely different story. President Trump showed incredible strength, incredible presence of mind to recognize in that moment what America needed to see. A president a leading presidential candidate triumphant in the face of a would-be assassin, a threat to America's democracy. We've been told forget about the last 3 years, since January 6th, we've been told literally since Donald Trump first came down that escalator in the spring, early summer of 2015, for nearly a decade, that he presented some sort of unique, unparalleled threat to what this nation stands for, when in fact the real threat had always been in such heavy and heavy-handed demonization of political opponents. You'll notice that something didn't happen on Saturday night or last night, even though thousands and thousands and thousands of Republicans gathered along Milwaukee's lakefront for the welcome party of the RNC. There wasn't a single riot. There wasn't a single bit of retaliatory violence, which has been something of the media's narrative over the past 12 to 15 hours as the initial shock of the attempted assassination wears off. Now we're delving into conspiracy theories from the blue and on sectors of the mainstream media that maybe Trump staged the whole thing, that maybe he wasn't actually hit with a sniper's bullet, but rather a piece of glass that had shattered from somewhere, we're not entirely sure where. But the reality is that democracy really is as fragile as we make it. And when we make it so fragile by constantly reinforcing this false notion that America is under assault, that democracy is threatened, if someone is elected, never mind the inherent paradox in terms there, but just think about what that does. What that does to just one person, and we don't know much about him. And you'll notice that I am not going to use the gunman's name. I am not going to give any identifying information. What I always do on this program, for those of you who have been listening and watching for a long time, you'll know this, is whenever there's a mass shooter or a terrorist, either foreign or domestic, or now we have to deal with a would-be assassin, the ultimate thing that they want is for validation for a legacy. They're invariably people who are socially ostracized, who believe that their lives haven't amounted to anything, and if they do this unspeakably heinous act, they'll get a measure of immortality, and they'll essentially subsume their victims, who will always be tied to them. Now, in the case of a school shooter, the names of those who are killed are invariably lost to history, but the names of, say, the Columbine gunmen live on even a quarter century later. That's a bit different with a presidential assassin, as it's impossible to forget the name of a former president, but they are indelibly tied to the legacy of the gunman. You can rarely think of JFK without thinking of the name Lee Harvey Oswald. I refuse to give the gunman the sort of immortality he craved, so I will be referring to him only as the gunman. In fact, I have done my best, even though it's going to be nearly impossible for me to forget his name, to try my best to forget it. Because, frankly, he deserves to be forgotten. What won't be forgotten, however, is the unforgettable image. The image of not just this campaign, Trump with Secret Service agents all around him, his face bloodied, his fist triumphant and defiant in the air. That was the image possibly of this past decade. And when I speak in historical terms like that, I don't do so for rhetorical flourish or to be hyperbolic. This, ladies and gentlemen, was one of the biggest events of the past 10 years. Forget about the presidential race for just a second. Forget about the politics of it. We have not seen an attempted assassination of a president since 1981, since the very first couple of months of the Ronald Reagan administration. And we have not seen a president as close to being killed in nearly 50 years. 2 millimeters was the difference between former President Trump becoming the 5th president to be assassinated. Just 2 millimeters. President Biden did address the nation a couple of times yesterday. His big address from his office, the Oval Office, last night said that we need to resolve our differences at the battle box. That is your president, ladies and gentlemen. Resolve those differences at the battle box. To say that this presidential race has changed is an understatement. You've got a president of the United States who, let's face it, has difficulty getting up and down stairs. You've got a former president and leading presidential contender who is defiant even in the face of certain death. There's a story, I'm not entirely sure if it's true, but it's been floating around for really the past 24 hours. President Trump, and first of all, this is just a testament to the man's strength, that within, 10 hours, 12 hours of being nearly killed, he's still on the golf course. Now, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea if this story is true. But he apparently sank a long putt on the course and turned to the crowd of people who were sort of playing along with him and said, "The difference between me and the shooter, I don't miss." Again, I don't know. It may be an apocryphal story, but it certainly is a powerful testament to who former President Trump is. What this also, I think, does is steal the resolve of every single Republican and every single conservative who will now, quite literally, if need be, crawl through broken glass to cast their ballot. There was a significant issue in this election of the quote-unquote double hater, the sort of voter who frankly doesn't like either President Trump or President Biden, and how they're going to lean very nearly is going to be the determining factor in this election. How exactly these voters are going to cast their ballots. Are they going to go to RFK? Are they going to hold their noses and vote for one of those candidates? Those voters, I believe now, are decidedly swinging for Trump. Moreover, you have people who maybe didn't totally buy into this messaging that Trump is an existential threat to democracy. Well, now, to them, just as to us, those who never believed it in the first place, to them, that messaging sounds silly. Really? The guy who very nearly was assassinated, he's the biggest threat to democracy that there is. Okay. Essentially, Democrats' one argument in this election was that, yes, President Biden has had a rather disastrous term in office. Yes, he may be too senile to actually govern. Well, never mind. He doesn't need to step down from the presidency. He just needs to step down as a candidate because we potentially might lose this election. Who really cares if the man's too senile to govern? They're basically all but saying the presidency is too big for one man, and don't worry, there is a cadre of 30 and 40-something they-thems who are surrounding the president and actually Edith Wilsoning this thing, making decisions for him. Now, that argument that Trump is an existential threat to democracy and you should ignore all of the issues with Joe Biden essentially goes away right now. It goes away because the average voter now sees through it. They see, hey, wait a second, he's not actually the biggest threat to democracy. The biggest threat was 2 millimeters to the left. You're listening to The Dan O'Donnell Show. We are live from the Republican National Convention. Coming up, we will talk with Congressman Brian Stile. We'll have more audio sound bites and much, much more when we return. Oh, God, my pleasure. Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah. How about this? Is that better? Okay, and just a heads up, you're hearing the sound bites, right? Okay, I could not hear the sound bite. I don't know why, but just for whatever reason, I couldn't hear it. No. Okay. Live from the Republican National Convention, it is the Dan O'Donnell Show. We are following breaking news. A federal judge has dismissed the Trump classified documents case, citing the appointments clause, saying that it was unconstitutional for the office of special counsel Jack Smith to essentially be a permanent special counsel's office. Now, this was something that was referenced throughout the presidential immunity case at the United States Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago, and now we are seeing, I believe, the first legal domino fall as a result of that Supreme Court decision in the special counsel's office being itself declared to be unconstitutional, which is a question that I actually raised a couple of weeks ago. We had President Trump attorney, former acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker on, who suggested this, I want to say a good month and a half ago, that in fact the special counsel's office itself was an unconstitutional appointment and that the apportionment of money to essentially run said office indefinitely was also unconstitutional. This was something that Judge Eileen Cannon also raised in her 93-page opinion that came out just about a half hour ago. So this is rather stunning news on the opening day of the Republican National Convention. Obviously, we are continuing to cover the just unbelievable miracle that by just 2 millimeters, former President Trump escaped death at an assassin's bullet during a rally in Pennsylvania. President Biden, in his address to the nation, expressed his goodwill and his feeling that former Trump is okay. Yes, we always want to pray for former Trump. Former Trump is doing great. That is nothing short of a miracle. Now, President Biden, who literally a week ago was calling Donald Trump the greatest threat to democracy that this world has ever known, is now calling on everybody, people on both sides, to lower the temperature. How we go forward is starting at the top, is it not? How we go forward is the guy who is, or at least the people around him who are giving the marching orders and constantly saying that President Trump is the greatest threat we've ever seen. It was not 2 years ago that President Biden at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, in order to essentially kick off the general election campaign during the midterm elections, called Trump and his supporters, millions of people, MAGA Republicans, the greatest threat to democracy. Again, what exactly do they think is going to happen when people are constantly, and I mean constantly, bombarded with the message that Trump is Hitler, that gay people are going to be locked up in camps, that women will not have nearly as many rights as an AR-15 if Donald Trump is elected? They've been doing it with the Project 2025 fear-mongering that has become the mainstream Democrat narrative over the past week and a half. Project 2025, if Trump is elected, is going to be an existential threat to pretty much everybody. Now, 99.999999% of people are going to take that for the political rhetoric that it is. Now, liberals have a tendency to take this sort of stuff more literally, but 99.999999% aren't taking it literally enough that they're feeling inclined to, or almost have a psychological need to, stop that existential threat. What was going through this gunman's mind before the sniper's bullet was undoubtedly the belief that he was going to save America, that he was going to be the hero. He was going to take out this threat to democracy. Now, it is true, at least it appears, that there is a voting record, that the voter is a registered Republican. He registered just in 2021, obviously right when he turned 18, as he was 20 years old. But this is a relatively common tactic. And remember, I'm hearing registered Republican, registered Republican, registered Republican. It was a common tactic, especially in the midterms of 2022, for Democrats to register as Republicans. Remember how they wanted to, quote unquote, meddle in Republican primaries. It was sort of the old Rush Limbaugh Operation Chaos, only in reverse. Democrats getting involved in Republican primaries in order to boost the least electable candidates. It was a stratagem that actually worked, and it was endorsed by House Speaker, then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, as she was actually spending money to get the candidates that they felt were the least electable out of the Republican primary and on to face Democratic candidates. So I would not put that past someone like this, that he bought into this. He also did make a donation through Act Blue for a progressive voter turnout project. So suffice it to say that this does not seem like your traditional registered Trump-loving Republican. Also, there are a significant number of Republicans still to this day who can't stand Donald Trump, as evidenced by the fact that there were so many Nikki Haley voters in the 2024 primary. Again, this is not to impugn anybody. There is one nut out of 330 million who actually attempted to assassinate the president. So please don't think that I am painting with anything more than the narrowest possible brush. When we come back live from the Republican National Convention, we will talk with Wisconsin Congressman Brian Stiles. Stay tuned. Dan O'Donnell Show is coming right back. Live from the Republican National Convention, it is the Dan O'Donnell Show with even more breaking news. Former President Trump says he is going to announce his running mate at the RNC today. And joining me for some instant reaction is Wisconsin Congressman Brian Stile. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So who do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, one man knows that answer. But the good news is, Republicans, we have a number of really highly qualified men and women who can take that role, whether or not that's Tim Scott, Marco Rubio, Glenn Youngkin. The list goes on. Unlike the Democrats, we have a long list of men and women who could step up and fill that role.
So we also have breaking news from about 45 minutes ago or so. Judge Eileen Cannon has dismissed the federal Trump documents case, the classified documents case that led to the raid at Mar-a-Lago last summer, a number of federal charges. She actually doesn't go into the constitutionality of whether or not Trump was able to keep those documents, the legal argument there, but rather she says that it was unconstitutional for special counsel Jack Smith's office to essentially exist. This was something that was raised, I believe, in a concurring opinion from Judge Clarence Thomas in the Trump immunity case. What's your immediate reaction to hearing that that case is dismissed?
All of these cases should be dismissed. I think so many people are frustrated that what we're watching has been these attacks on President Trump from a judicial standpoint. Allow the voters to vote in November. That's what the people want. Allow the election to make the determination of who's the next president. Don't allow these unelected or elected prosecutors to be taking these kinds of actions. I think it's positive that this is behind us now to allow us to really focus in and talk about the policies that are going to be needed to get our country back on track.
Now, obviously, what is consuming the entire country, the entire world, really, the attempted assassination of former President Trump on Saturday. Where were you when you heard the news?
Yeah, I was actually doing laundry at my house in Janesville, getting ready to come to Milwaukee, and I had the TV on in the room and looked up and thought, what the heck is going on? I think like a lot of people. But as we all reflect, I think it's maybe a moment of sobriety that was needed in this country to pause, reflect at the rhetoric and the dialogue that's been used by way too many folks, and focus back in on what makes our country so great and what we need to do to get ourselves back on track, how we're going to bring inflation down, how we're going to secure the U.S.-Mexico border, how we're going to lead from strength from a national security perspective. If we're focused back in on the policies at the end of the day, that's something positive that could come out of a horrific situation.
When you talk about that rhetoric, though, isn't it incumbent upon the president himself? We've got a tweet as recently as June 28th saying that President Trump is a threat to democracy and should not be allowed to be anywhere near the White House. I mean, you and I understand that to be rhetoric, to be halfway insane, to be clear, but there was clearly at least one person out of 330 million in this country who took that message to heart. Does that start with the president? Does that start with congressional Democrats? Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi has repeated that message. Obviously, members of the squad have been saying that constantly. When you get bombarded with this idea that one man could undo this entire nation, isn't that sending something of a message to a would-be psychopath?
Yeah, I think a lot of the rhetoric that we've seen across the board for the last 3.5 years has been over the top. People are petrified that President Trump could take the White House and get this country back on track again. And so we've seen this, but maybe there is a moment of sobriety. We saw the DNC, obviously led by the Biden campaign, take down the ads that were driving around on the Milwaukee city buses. I don't offer that is a massive change, but maybe that's a step in the right direction. And so let's look at what words are being used, how people are talking in particular about President Trump in the days ahead. I do hope that we will have a moment of sobriety, and I'm not going to be Pollyannish that there's going to be some massive sea change, but the more we're focused in on the policies to get our country moving forward rather than the attacks on the person, I think would be really a productive moment.
Wisconsin Congressman Brian Stile joining me live from the Media Center here at the Republican National Convention. We're actually inside the UWM Panther Arena, and folks, it is just absolutely incredible incredible what has been built. I was in the Fiserv Forum a couple of days ago, sort of getting the lay of the land, and it is going to look incredible on television tonight, where again President Trump is going to announce, we believe he is going to come out and announce who he is picking as his vice presidential running mate. This is apparently just a week that we're going to have nonstop breaking news, Congressman style. And in addition to that, we're also hearing that in a break from tradition, President Trump may be awarded, the delegations may vote tonight. I have not heard confirmation of that. Usually that happens on the Wednesday night before the president then gives his acceptance speech on Thursday night. But what are you hoping that the overall theme and messaging is going to be? Because we know today's theme is Make America Wealthy once again. It's Make America Safe once again. Every day has a theme. But now I think all of that has changed. So what do you hope to hear from some of the speakers?
I hope we really talk about the contrast in policies between President Biden and President Trump. And uniquely, we have functionally two incumbents running against each other. So you can truly compare and contrast the policy differences. You can look at the policies that President Trump put in place to secure the U.S.-Mexico border. You can contrast that very clearly, that on day one, President Biden began unwinding those border security policies and allowed the disaster that's occurred at the U.S.-Mexico border. And we could go down the list, whether or not that is tax policy, whether or not that is our foreign policy, where President Trump was leading from strength. President Biden comes in, and out of the gates, we see an absolute disaster in the withdrawal from Afghanistan, including the death of numerous service members from the United States.
Even though President Biden swore to the American people that there wasn't a single service member on his watch killed, despite those 13 who were killed at the Afghanistan airport. When you talk about the difference in policy, do you think that there's one issue that sort of rises above the rest? I mean, I would guess that the issue that most Americans feel, it's not even one that they see, it's they feel just the affordability crisis that we're in right now. The average cost of living for the family of four, your average family of four across the country, roughly $1,000+ per month, $12,000 a year. I mean, that's just astronomical. But could it also be the illegal immigration crisis, which really was the issue that propelled President Trump to the forefront of the Republican Party early in 2015, a perch he never really left?
It's unquestionably, to me, the two I's: inflation, illegal immigration. And I think it's a little bit is going to depend on who you are. So in particular, if you're a young family trying to go from paying the rent to paying the mortgage, and you can't afford the things that your family needs, that will be your number one issue. Think about this. The median mortgage moved from $1,200 to $2,400 in 3.5 years for the same house. Your car is more expensive. It's more expensive to fuel up your car. It's more expensive to insure your car. Groceries are more expensive. And so if you're uniquely a young family, you're getting clobbered harder than almost anyone. The other in that group is seniors on fixed incomes.
Yep.
The illegal immigration side, think if you're a family in Whitewater, Wisconsin, a community of 15,000 people, where 1,000 migrants have moved over the past 2 years, primarily from Nicaragua and Venezuela. A school district of 2,000 kids added 200 students, primarily Spanish language speakers. So if you have a child in that school district, illegal immigration is probably your number one issue. But between illegal immigration and inflation, I think those are the two issues that are going to drive voters this November.
There was a story that came out, I believe it was the Associated Press. A couple of unnamed Democratic consultants, political people, said nothing matters anymore, that now they're just focused on salvaging the Senate and the House of Representatives, that they believe the assassination attempt on Trump, and really more significantly, the image of him with his fist up in the air, pumping his fist, urging his supporters to, quote, fight, 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 is one that just can't be beaten. Do you tend to agree with that?
I think there is a part of that that's true, but I wouldn't rest on our laurels.
No, and so, please don't misunderstand.
But there are people that think like that, that are saying this is in the bag, I'm good to go. No, this is the state of Wisconsin in particular, where every vote is going to count. And this is our opportunity to make sure that conservatives are motivated to have their voice heard. We called it early, vote early, and then we called it bank the vote. And President Trump has rebranded it to swamp the vote.
Yeah.
This is making sure that Republicans and conservatives, as we are, use all the tools in the toolkit to get that vote out, because at the end of the day, although we feel really good, you never know how things are going to happen. You could just look at Ron Johnson's race. He should have swamped Mandela Barnes. And in the state of Wisconsin, at the end of the day, it's always close.
Yeah, and it's always coming down to Wisconsin. I believe that this election is about 3 states. It's the Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania blue wall, what Hillary Clinton rested on her laurels, knowing that she was going to win, that came tumbling down, that was then rebuilt for Joe Biden. It does appear that Pennsylvania, where this shooting took place, is moving much more solidly to President Trump. But it is entirely possible that for a 3rd straight election cycle, Wisconsin is the linchpin, isn't it?
It's unquestionable that is most likely the case. It always feels that way in Wisconsin. It's probably been that way since about 2010. And the national attention is here's why one of the reasons I think President Trump chose Milwaukee in Wisconsin to host this convention is we know that Wisconsin is the tip of the spear on the election. There are a number of people that will reflexively vote Democrat in the state of Wisconsin, which is why turning out our voters at the end of the day is absolutely essential.
He is Wisconsin Congressman Brian Stile making the rounds here at the Media Center at the Republican National Convention. Sir, what does your rest of your day look like?
I got a handful of interviews. I got a couple panels. I'm going to be talking in particular with Glenn Youngkin and Senator Hagerty from Tennessee on a manufacturing panel about how we're going to bring jobs back to the U.S. And then tonight we're going to find out who the Vice President of the United States is.
I can't wait, sir. Hey, it's always wonderful to see you, my friend. I'm sure we'll be bumping into you lots this week. He is Congressman Brian Stile. I am Dan O'Donnell. A reminder, coming up after the top of the hour, we will hear from the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and much more. Dan O'Donnell Show live from the convention. Conservative thought, not just talk. It is the Dan O'Donnell Show live from the UWM Panther Arena. It is the media center here at the Republican National Convention. We do thank again Congressman Brian Stile for joining me just a couple of minutes ago. Coming up after the top of the hour news, it is certain to be a news-making interview with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. He is going to join us live right at 10:06, 10:07. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss that. A rundown of all of the news that was broken just within the last hour and 15 minutes. A federal judge in Florida has dismissed the Trump classified documents case, citing that this is a violation of the Appointments Clause of Article 2 of the Constitution. Essentially, that special counsel Jack Smith's entire office was unconstitutionally appointed, and that the funds apportioned to fund the office unconstitutionally apportioned. The bottom line is that the case is dismissed. Just about, I would say 20 minutes ago on Fox News, in an interview with Brett Baer, former President Trump himself confirmed that the VP selection will be made, or at least announced tonight, that President Trump has decided on a running mate, and that today at the Republican National Convention, President Trump will be making that announcement. Now, this is something of a break from tradition that normally you don't hear from the nominee until his acceptance speech the very last night of the convention. But let's face it, nothing about President Trump's first run for office, his presidency, or his second run for office has been conventional, and coming just 2 days after he came within 2 millimeters of being killed by a sniper's bullet in Pennsylvania, the president, I think, wants to address his supporters more than anything else. It is the Dan O'Donnell Show, and of course, we have some traditions here. Chief among them, each and every day, we name the unhinged liberal of the day.
I find it hard to believe that the same thing had happened to Biden and even all of their impulse, their compulsion to do or avoid anything
Now, let's face it, you have got probably 25 million liberals on social media who would qualify as today's unhinged liberal of the day. There is already a montage of people on TikTok celebrating the fact that Trump was shot or lamenting the fact that the assassin missed. Any one of those clearly would be unhinged. But only one can rise to the level of unhinged liberal of the day, and that is Keith Olbermann, who tweeted out yesterday, the strangest parts of this are 12 plus hours, and A, no authorities are confirming Trump's assertion that he was shot, as opposed to the glass story or any other explanation, and B, there seem to be few media questions as to why they haven't. Don't mistake me here. There are countless attempted shootings in which the target isn't actually shot. Doesn't make them less serious, doesn't make the target any less a target. Doesn't in this case. It's just such a disconnect given investigators have confirmed others were shot. Keith, there's actually an AP photo, or maybe it's a New York Times photo, of the bullet whizzing past Trump's head. Thank you, producer Dave. It is the New York Times photographer actually captured the bullet whizzing past Trump's right ear after going through said right ear. Keith Olbermann is your unhinged liberal of the day. The media coverage of the attempted assassination of former President Trump is embarrassing, to say the least. That you had, first of all, in the initial reporting, President Trump drops to the ground after loud noises are heard. I'll give some deference and cut a tiny little bit of slack, because the last thing a media organization is going to want to do is to spread panic or fear by reporting something that isn't totally accurate. Within at least 15 minutes, however, it was obvious that President Trump was shot, or at the very least shot at, and reporters on the ground were confirming this. we still had loud noises heard. President Trump shot, or they wouldn't say shot. They wouldn't say attempted assassination. It was a shooting incident at the Trump rally. But in the hours since the quote-unquote shooting incident, the reporting has gotten even worse. As President Trump, when he got up and urged his supporters to fight, fight, fight while pumping his fist, that has come under fire by certain members of the liberal press saying, well, he shouldn't have done that. We're talking about toning down the rhetoric. And he needed to have the presence of mind milliseconds after he came millimeters from certain death to lower the temperature. Meanwhile, you've got a president who is telling us constantly to lower the temperature as he is constantly calling former President Trump a threat to democracy. You are listening to the Dan O'Donnell Show live from the convention. We will be back with House Speaker Mike Johnson next. Live from the Republican National Convention in downtown Milwaukee, I am Dan O'Donnell. I am pleased and honored to be joined by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson. Sir, welcome to the Dan O'Donnell Show. Welcome to Wisconsin. How are you liking Milwaukee so far?
I love Milwaukee. Everybody's been so hospitable. We feel right at home. There's a lot of energy here and excitement, and it's great to be here.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, what have you been doing since you've gotten in? I assume you've been on the phone pretty much constantly.
There's a lot happening right now, of course. We're beginning our investigation of the failed assassination attempt and what looks to be oversights and security there. Lots of breaking news. Even today, the Jack Smith case has been dismissed. I'm preparing the speeches. I'll be chairing all the convention events here this afternoon. So a lot going on right now.
I want to focus in on your call for a full congressional investigation into the Secret Service lapses. From your eyes, what was the biggest mistake that was made?
There were many, apparently. Now, we don't want to draw conclusions yet because we're in the early stages of all this. But, I had Secretary Mayorkas of Department of Homeland Security on the telephone within hours at the event. I mean, he presides over all of this, right? I asked him some very simple questions that he did not have answers to. One of them was, where were the drones? I mean, it is a standard practice and procedures now that drones fly over an event like this. Obviously, a drone would have spotted someone on a rooftop. He didn't know the answer to the question. Now, look, there's a lot of questions to be asked and answered now. We're compiling a number of them. We're going to take this very seriously, and we're going to move very quickly because the American people deserve answers. But it does look like a series of mistakes, and they're inexcusable.
Do you believe that the shooter being able to get into position, it appears that he used a ladder to get up onto this roof in apparently full view of spectators who could be seen on video trying to alert local law enforcement that he was there? Do you just have a difficult time understanding how that's even possible in guarding who should be the most guarded man, or at least one of the most guarded men in America?
We all do. I mean, he's not only he should be the most guarded man, he's the most openly attacked. I mean, of any political figure, any public figure since probably Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he's more in jeopardy. He's also the former president. He's not just a candidate, so he already has Secret Service coverage. But because he's under serious threat and because he's at an open-air event, you would think they would leave nothing to chance. And it looks as though there were serious mistakes. That's a problem. We've got to get down to the bottom of it, and we're going to use every oversight ability that we have under the Constitution to make sure that happens.
There have been a number of calls by Republicans in your caucus, Senate Republicans as well, for the director of the Secret Service to step down, not just because of those lapses that you talked about, but because there has been an open battle with Republican National Convention organizers and the Secret Service with respect to where protest zones were going to be. President Trump has requested more Secret Service repeatedly. Those requests apparently went unanswered. Do you join those calls for the director of the Secret Service to resign?
We have to get a few answers first. As Speaker of the House, you can't launch off without having all the facts. I'm a lawyer. I want to put the evidence together. It won't take us long to do so. There are serious questions, however, and some of the comments she made about, what the top priorities of the Secret Service were. It's not diversity, it's protection. That's an obvious thing that you'll hear echoed over and over. So we'll determine the appropriate steps, but I am just as frustrated as everyone is. And we have the responsibility to get the answers, and we will.
Switching gears just a little bit, we have heard a lot about lowering the temperature. That was the focus of President Biden's speech to the American people last night. In fact, it was the very first thing that came out of his mouth last night. He himself, however, has repeatedly, in a tweet as recently as June 28th, called President Trump the greatest threat to democracy. Do you believe that it's incumbent on Democrats not to have hollow rhetoric about everybody needing to lower the temperature, but to have some introspection and say, hey, wait a second, calling somebody who would be democratically elected in November an existential threat to democracy is potentially motivating someone like the gunman on Saturday?
It is. They completely vilified Donald Trump as an individual. This is not a debate over policies. It's over personality. And they've actually compared him to Hitler. I mean, some of the Democrat fundraising machine and all the rest. It's dangerous rhetoric. It really is. Where the temperature is at a boiling point around the country. It's a tinderbox. And people in elected office, especially the President of the United States, have a responsibility to calm things down. Every member of Congress does, and some of my Democrat colleagues have been the worst offenders of this. They paint Donald Trump out to be the end of democracy. You know, I mean, they say these things all the time, so it triggers folks. We can have vigorous debate. We can have vigorous policy disagreements and discussions and arguments even, but it can't be personal. I pine for the days of Ronald Reagan. You know, he and Tip O'Neill were on the diametrically opposed sides of policy. Tip O'Neill was the Democrat Speaker of the House. But when Reagan's assassination attempt took place, the first person to visit him was the Democrat Speaker of the House because they had such respect for one another. They had a friendship that allowed them to have vigorous policy debates. So we got to get back to that. That's what our system is built upon. I think President Trump understands that. I've been heartened to see some of the things he's saying in the last 24 hours or so. He believes that God providentially spared him from an assassination, and I do as well. I think most of us do. And he understands the gravity and the history of this moment, and he believes that he's been given a chance to unify the country. That's his words, not ours. He's redrafted his speech for the last night here in Milwaukee, and we're anxiously anticipating what he'll say. I believe he can be a transformative figure for the country, and I believe God's going to give him that opportunity.
Have you spoken to President Trump since the assassination attempt?
Via text. I haven't been one. He's gotten thousands of phone calls, of course. I wanted to let him heal up, and I knew everybody would be in his business. And I'm looking forward to visiting him. I'm looking across here to Chris LaCivita, his campaign director, and we're going to be visiting here shortly. We'll be spending a lot of time with President Trump over the next few days, and I've spent a lot of time with him in the weeks and months leading up to this. He's in a great place. He understands his role in history. I told him he could be the most consequential president of the modern era because we had to fix everything, and he's ready to do it.
Also breaking news this morning, we had the Trump classified documents case dismissed.
Yes.
Your reaction to that?
Well, as a constitutional law litigator, as my former life, I think obviously that is the right result. I have not yet had a moment to read the opinion. I've been going down media row, so I haven't had a chance. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. It's the right result. We've been investigating and complaining about Jack Smith and his abuses since the moment he was appointed. I think the judge has acknowledged that this thing was amiss, and I think that's the right result. I'm sure it'll be appealed, but it's a relief to President Trump and a relief to us.
Do you think this has bearing on the other federal case also prosecuted by Jack Smith, since this judge, and even though in her ruling she said, look, this is specific to this case, this doesn't have precedential value for the other case, but do you think there is the potential that the other federal case is dropped as well, if not for the unconstitutional appointment of Jack Smith, but also because of the presidential immunity decision the Supreme Court reached, which seems to most directly impact that January 6th case?
It does. Those are great questions. As a litigator, you pull all the latest jurisprudence together, all the case law, and you have to determine what arguments you can develop from that. I think that the law is going in a new direction here, and I think it's a direction towards sanity. You can't have special counsels with this just sort of completely unimpeded authority with no one apparently that they answer to other than Congress, and they barely do that. Engaging in lawfare, and that's what's happened. I mean, that is what has happened. They have used the Department of Justice and our court system to go after a political opponent. That's what happened here. Everybody can see it, and now the courts are beginning to acknowledge that, and it's not appropriate. What you do there is you undermine the people's faith in our system of justice itself, and that is a great threat to our republic.
President Trump also said this morning in an interview with Fox News that tonight he was going to name his running mate.
Yeah.
That's a very knowing smile, sir. Those of you watching, that is a very knowing smile. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Do you know anything we don't?
No, I don't know anything. Look, I mean, I think he holds those cards very close. I have been very careful not to let him know all of my opinions on that. All the people on the short list are all friends of mine. So the thing about the Republican Party is we have an embarrassment of riches. We've got a deep bench. There are lots of people who could bring a lot to the ticket. So I'm as excited as everybody else to see how this develops.
Well, sir, I know you are incredibly busy. I know you've got to go. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do just want to say thank you for making time for us. Welcome to Wisconsin. We hope you enjoy your time here at the RNC in Milwaukee, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you in the future.
Great to see you. God bless you.
You too, sir. That is House Speaker Mike Johnson joining me here on the Dan O'Donnell Show live from the Republican National Convention. We are going to take just a very quick break, and we will be right back with more conservative thought, not just talk. Welcome back to the Dan O'Donnell Show live from the Republican National Convention. We do thank House Speaker Mike Johnson for making some time for us. He is obviously incredibly busy, and I'm telling you, as soon as I said former President Trump is going to name his running mate today, there was a big smile that appeared on his face. No, I don't actually think he knows who it is. I believe, this is just me speculating, I believe it's down to J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Tim Scott. Those are the names I keep hearing. I was at the Welcome Delegates party last night, and everybody had, it was something of a parlor game. Obviously, the big topic of conversation was exactly what you thought it was, the attempted assassination of former President Trump. But a secondary, more fun topic of conversation was, will he announce his running mate today, and who will it be? I can tell you now, this is where I'm going to urge a bit of caution, and I will cite my own knowledge of television and Hollywood productions and that sort of thing. Whenever there's a big show, whenever there's a ton of interest, the one that immediately comes to mind is Game of Thrones, right? Everybody wanted to know how Game of Thrones was going to end, and in order to keep the ending secret, they didn't want leaks coming out from the actors or the cast and crew. Oftentimes, there are multiple different endings that are filmed, sort of dummy endings, or at least multiple different scripts that are given out. The actors are only given their part, so they can't quite piece together everything that happens. This is how jealously producers and directors guard their scripts, okay? What I can tell you, and the rumor that I kept hearing, and this is, again, based on nothing more than what people are hearing at the convention, that the introductory video that is going to play before the nominee is introduced was for J.D. Vance. Now, is it entirely possible that a video of Senator Marco Rubio was also filmed? Is it entirely possible that an intro video for pretty much every speaker was filmed? Yes, all of those are distinct possibilities. But I keep hearing that J.D. Vance, his stock has essentially skyrocketed. He is the freshman senator from Ohio, first elected in 2022 during the midterms. That actually saw not a red tsunami, but a red trickle. Ohio has been the exception, as that was the quintessential swing state in 2004, the state that actually delivered George W. Bush the presidency. It is now solidly Republican, and Vance, I think, is more in line with his politics as President Trump, a sort of conservative populist, in a way that maybe a Marco Rubio or a Tim Scott isn't. Even though Rubio was elected in the Tea Party election, the red wave of 2010, and is seen as a conservative. Remember, he famously feuded with President Trump during the 2016 election. Trump called him Little Marco, and in the last couple of weeks of his campaign, Rubio is taking about as heavy a shots on Trump as possible. Now, what I will say is their relationship has gotten much, much better. I think both men realized that this was politics, let's face it. And politics is a game in which sometimes you have to go incredibly personal. But Rubio and Trump obviously do get along. In terms of Tim Scott or possibly Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, Burgum was considered the odds-on favorite for about the last month or so, but just within the last week. And I have been increasingly using Polymarket, which is a political betting site. It provides odds as to who is more likely to win the presidency, say the Democratic nomination. It was interesting. For a period there last week, Kamala Harris had higher odds of winning the presidency than Joe Biden. It was something like 19% to 18%. And for those wondering, President Trump now sits on Polymarket as a 71% favorite to win the presidency this November. I don't believe, as some do, and there was an article out yesterday, Democratic strategists are just absolutely paralyzed with fear. They are convinced that this election ended on Saturday. As soon as Trump raised his fist, as soon as the photograph was taken, of Trump standing triumphant with blood on his face, his fist raised, that there was just no way to combat that Democrats were going to have to worry about holding the Senate and holding the House, that the presidency was already lost, especially with President Trump and President Biden showing such a clear contrast. One of my favorite memes that has come out of this is there's a picture of Trump with his fist raised, and it's Trump versus Bullet. And then below it, it's Biden tripping up the Air Force One big boy stairs and Biden versus stairs. That's pretty much all you have to say. Now, one thing this does do, and I have heard from a number of different Democrat people speaking in both the national media and just one or two that I have spoken to privately, they believe that the assassination attempt on Trump actually probably helps Biden stay in this race, that it's now less likely than it was on Saturday morning that Biden's going to be the Democrat nominee. And privately, I think there is at least some sigh of relief being breathed right now in lib circles that for the first time in 2.5 weeks, people aren't talking about President Biden being too senile to run for a second term. Remember, they're still not saying that President Biden is too senile to govern because, frankly, they don't really care about how well he can govern. They only care about whether or not they are going to win. Now, one aspect of this that I think is just beyond insane is how the media has been focused so heavily on toning down the rhetoric from the right. On CBS News, Catherine Vinograd and Margaret Brennan, as the events were unfolding in Pennsylvania, this was during the breaking news coverage, were openly speculating about the threat of a retaliatory attack from some conservative. Yes, the cauldron of tensions that was ignited by constantly calling one man a threat to democracy. Well, one man and all of his 80 million supporters are threats to democracy. That has absolutely nothing to do with the heightened temperature. No. What we're fearing is a retaliatory attack. Well, it's been nearly 48 hours and there hasn't been even a whiff of violence. Again, there were tens of thousands of Republicans flocking to Milwaukee all throughout the weekend. There were probably at least 5,000 to 6,000 on the Summerfest grounds last night. Of course, it wouldn't be Milwaukee in the summer of 2024 without a rainstorm pretty much ending the fun in the middle of the Trace Atkins concert. He had to end a little bit early. The fireworks went off before it started pouring. But there wasn't a single bit of talk about retaliatory violence. There's nobody taking to the streets to defend Donald Trump, despite President Biden saying that we're going to settle this at the ballot box, or rather the battle box. Nobody is doing it. I just love this soundbite, by the way. At the battle box. Not with bullets, at the battle box. He said it twice. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. I have slips of the tongue all the time. Does he honestly think it's the battle box? So you go in like armed with a mace, maybe a spear, and you settle your differences at the battle box? The battle box. Live from the Republican National Convention, it is the Dan O'Donnell Show. We'll be right back after this. Classical conservatism, contemporary style. It is the Dan O'Donnell Show, live from the Republican National Convention. We are on Media Row at UWM Panther Arena. President Trump will accept the Republican nomination at the Fiserv Forum, where all of the main speeches will be held tonight. It is going to be an absolutely spectacular evening. I can't wait. Personally, President Trump is expected to announce his vice presidential running mate tonight. And this is going to be just an incredible evening. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. I personally cannot wait for it. You'll have to excuse me 1 second. We appeared to be having an issue with one of our headsets. Had to just really quickly switch. Hope you can hear me a little bit better in glorious stereo. Of course, thank you, producer Dave. He says I do sound better. Thank you very much. Just had to quickly switch the headset there. I do apologize. Very interesting news from MSNBC. I was desperately looking forward to Morning Joe's take on everything, but Morning Joe was nowhere to be found. MSNBC stayed in breaking news coverage and actually pulled Morning Joe from the air this morning. CNN reports a person familiar with the matter tells CNN the decision was made to avoid a scenario in which one of the show's stable of 24+ guests might make an inappropriate comment on live television that could be used to assail the program and network as a whole. Given the breaking news nature of the story, the person said it made more sense to continue airing rolling breaking news coverage in the fraught political moment. Given the gravity and complexity of this unfolding story, NBC News Now, and MSNBC have remained in rolling breaking news coverage since Saturday evening. A spokesperson for NBC News Group said in a statement, NBC Universal, as we continue to cover this story into the week, the networks will continue to cross-simulcast, alternating between NBC News Now, and MSNBC reports, so there is one news feed covering this developing situation. This is something of a powerful admission that Morning Joe, and almost by extension, all of the shows that were preempted by the breaking news coverage, are certifiably insane. The risk is too great that one of these nut jobs is going to say something that people could use to assail MSNBC as a whole. Yeah, obviously they're going to be saying, you know what they want to avoid? They want to avoid a situation, and one of these people sounds like one of the several dozen TikTokers in an already viral mashup of them saying that they wish that the shooter had better aim. There was already someone who had a tweet, I think is now since deleted, "Make America aim again." These are MSNBC's guests. These are MSNBC's hosts. These are the very people who have been telling their audience that Trump is the devil, that Trump is going to end democracy. If you want to talk about lowering the temperature, if you want to talk about a more healthy political rhetoric, it starts and ends on that cable network. Okay? This is not a two-way street. Has there ever been a Republican who has said Joe Biden is a threat to democracy? What Biden has done, turning his Justice Department loose on his chief political rival, the leading presidential candidate, getting the third-ranking Department of Justice official, Matthew Colangelo, to quit his cushy job in Washington to become a line prosecutor in Manhattan to revive a so-called zombie case against Trump, where it's obvious that the statute of limitations had run. I do want to pass along this. The man who was killed, a 52-year-old by the name of Corey Comparatori, died protecting his family. His daughter posted on Facebook a tribute to her father. Yesterday, time stopped, and when it started again, my family and I started living a real-life nightmare. What was supposed to be an exciting day that we had all looked forward to, especially my dad, turned into the most traumatizing experience someone could imagine. I know the media will cover this event, and I'm going to try my best to stay away from looking at everything, especially because I've already seen and lived through it in real time. But I want everyone to know what the media will not cover and will not say about him. He was the best dad a girl could ever ask for. My sister and I never needed for anything. You call, he would answer, and he would do whatever it is you needed. And if he didn't know how, he would figure out how. He could talk and make friends with anyone, which he was doing all day yesterday and loved every minute of it. He was a man of God, loved Jesus fiercely, and also looked after our church and our members as family. The media will not tell you that he died a real-life superhero. They are not going to tell you how quickly he threw my mom and I to the ground. They are not going to tell you that he shielded my body from the bullet that came at us. He loved his family. He truly loved us enough to take a real bullet for us. And I want nothing more than to cry on him and tell him thank you. I want nothing more than to wake up and for this not to be reality for me and my family. We lost a selfless, loving husband, father, brother, and uncle, son, and friend. And I will never stop thinking about him and mourning over him until the day that I die too. July 13th will forever be a day that changed my life. I will never be the same person I was less than 24 hours ago. There are a lot of children out there that say their dad is their hero, but my dad really is mine. I don't think I would be here today without him. Dad, I love you so much. There aren't enough words to express how deep that love goes. I know you'll give heaven some hell. I know that God is proud of the man that came to his gates yesterday. And then she includes a number of pictures of herself with her father, Corey Comparatori. I apologize if I am getting that last name's pronunciation wrong. Boy, I was getting a little emotional reading that, folks. And it just brings it back to the human toll that this takes. I mean, already and almost instantly. I mean, you literally can't divorce this from the politics. The fact that there was an attempted assassination of a United States president, of the leading candidate for president in 2024. You can't take the politics away, but let's not forget, there is a man who was loved, who was the head of a family, who is dead. There are two people in critical condition fighting for their lives. Last I've heard, both are expected to survive, but there are people whose lives are forever changed, not to mention the family of Donald Trump and Trump himself as a person. You know, we have a tendency to almost dehumanize political figures, celebrities, people in the public spotlight, and forget that they are people too. You know, we focus on President Trump and the iconic image of his fist raised, but we don't focus on how traumatizing that must be for him, for his son Barron, who I was told, I don't know if that has been confirmed, that he was actually in the crowd in Pennsylvania. In any event, we are going to step aside for a break. And folks, I am aware I completely forgot to give out the keyword in the Sizzlin' Summer Cash Contest. That word is credit. CREDIT, credit. You have got until 55 past the hour. Have no fear. You've still got 10 minutes or so to give out the word credit. If you go to our website, enter the keyword credit. You have got 10 minutes to do so. I do apologize. We had a big guest, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, joining us in the 10 o'clock hour, and then we were right back into programming on this, a very, very big news day. Just to recap, we had the Trump classified documents case dismissed right before we went on the air at 9 o'clock this morning, and then President Trump confirming to Brett Baier of Fox News that he is going to name his vice presidential running mate tonight. The running mate is expected to speak tomorrow night here at the Republican National Convention. Although he may end up doing his speech tonight, we're still not quite sure how the logistics of that is going to work. If there's one thing I can tell you, this is going to be one of the most surprising, one of the most watched, if not the most watched conventions in modern American history, and we are going to be here for every single second of it. I am Dan O'Donnell. We will be right back after this. It is the Dan O'Donnell Show. Welcome back to it, live from the Republican National Convention. We are at the Media Center at the UWM Panther Arena. We will be here all week long. We are just to the right of where Clay and Buck will be taking over in about 8 minutes or so. They are on stage at our iHeartRadio booth. We're right in front of the Daily Wire, just to the left of the Benny Johnson Show. Daily Signal is here. Breitbart News is right in front of us. And the security is just absolutely astounding. There was a lot of talk in the wake of the assassination attempt on former President Trump, whether the security apparatus would be changed, whether the perimeters would be moved out or anything like that. In truth, I'm not sure, and folks, I will not be doing any details of security or anything like that, so please don't worry. I'm not going to be giving away any Secret Service positions or talking about where fences are, anything like that, but to suffice it to say, it is impossible to get anywhere near the Pfizer Forum, and you can see the drones, the helicopters are patrolling the skies. There are police officers and other law enforcement officers here from all across the country. Just this morning, walking in through one of the pedestrian gates, I saw officers from Tennessee. There were a couple from Florida. There was one from Kentucky. I mean, it's just astounding. In addition to all of the Secret Service personnel that is here, that was a significant concern also at the Welcome Delegates Party. It was called the Red, White, and Brew Party last night, given the open air nature of Summerfest. And this was all outside. It was all well outside of the secure zone in downtown Milwaukee. It was at the Summerfest grounds. There was concern about the security there. It was completely locked down. I don't know a single person who was at all concerned about the security there. There's also going to be a big party at Potawatomi Hotel and Casino on Thursday night where a lot of the delegates are going to be following President Trump's speech. I can't imagine that there's going to be any issue there. Now, of course, nobody could have imagined just a couple of days ago that there would be an attempt on former President Trump's life, that someone would be able to get a rifle that close to the President of the United States. So it's, I think, an increased police presence, and there's a more visible police presence down here than there might have otherwise been had the events of Saturday night not happened. But the reality is that I don't think there's a single person here who is feeling in the least bit concerned about security. That said, the eyes of the entire world are on Milwaukee. I should report, I did report, and it kind of got lost in the events of Saturday evening. On Saturday afternoon, and I don't know the specific time, a member of Trump's traveling party actually had an SUV stolen from the Pfister Hotel valet, this via multiple law enforcement sources. I don't know if it was a Trump family member. Far more likely it was just a member of the traveling party. It was a press secretary or somebody like that. But what happened was the thief actually went into the valet box where they keep all of the keys at the Pfister and just took a bunch of keys and then started hitting key fob unlock buttons to see if he could get lucky. He did. He actually took off with one of those SUVs. He was arrested at a Walmart on Brown Deer Road a short time later after police were able to track him using the vehicle's OnStar. So I guess welcome to there is no more Milwaukee tradition, it seems, than having your car stolen. In terms of the other breaking news that we have been following this morning, Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida dismissing the Trump classified documents case. And she essentially ruled that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, unlawfully appointed Special Prosecutor Jack Smith. The president never nominated Smith, and the Senate never confirmed him. That's a direct violation of Article 2 of the Constitution. It's known as the Appointments Clause. So Judge Cannon granted the defense's motion to dismiss on those grounds. She writes, upon careful study of the foundational challenges raised in the motion, the court is convinced that Special Counsel Smith's prosecution of this action breaches two structural cornerstones of our constitutional scheme: the role of Congress in the appointment of constitutional officers and the role of Congress in authorizing expenditures by law. There was a secondary grounds for dismissal that Cannon never expanded on, and that was the funding of Smith's office. There was essentially an indefinite apportionment of government funds to fund this office and to fund the prosecution of Donald Trump that Congress never apportioned. Now, that's a direct violation of what's known as the Apportionments Clause. Congress has the power of the purse. The president, the executive branch, does not. Congress gets to decide what we spend money on, not the other way around, okay? So the president, first of all, did not make a lawful appointment. The Senate was never given the opportunity to weigh in on that appointment. That violates the Constitution. Had the appointment been lawful, then Judge Cannon says we can get into the secondary argument of the Apportionment Clause, which was also violated because Congress never apportioned funds that would have been used to pay for these prosecutions. So all in all, is there a human being who has had a better 3-day stretch than Donald J. Trump? First of all, God spares his life from an assassin's bullet by about 2 millimeters. I guess there are some sticklers out there who said, Dan, you probably mean 2 centimeters. No, I feel like if Donald Trump did not turn his head, had his head been 2 millimeters angled a different way, that bullet goes straight through his skull. But first, he dodges an assassin's bullet. And second, he has a sham indictment, a sham case against him, dropped by a federal judge on the exact same day that his Republican National Convention opens. That is one heck of a stretch. We are just about out of time here on the Dan O'Donnell Show. Clay and Buck are next. They're getting ready right next to me, in fact, here at the Republican National Convention. We are here every single day. I'll probably be doing a couple of live streams, so watch for that on social media at Dan O'Donnell Show everywhere. Other than that, we will be talking to you tomorrow live from the convention, 9 o'clock right here on the Dan O'Donnell Show.
Let me get